Yes, hello everyone. I'm Gideon, and today's lecture is going to be about motivational UX framework. We're going to be touching on the four pillars of motivational UX, affordances, feedback, flow, and gamification. Uh, in this class, we are going to be covering different learning goals. By the end of the session, we want to be able to think about interactions that motivate and guide users. We want to be able to identify where engagement drops in a single flow and fix it. We want to be able to use feedback to reduce anxiety and build confidence when users are interacting with the system. We'll be able to apply gamification without manipulating the users, and we'll be able to support long-term engagement and not just short-term excitement. And I'll just start this way. Have you ever used the platform where you keep using it, you keep going back to it, not because you have to, but because you want to? So when you're using it, it's like you keep coming back because there's a particular feeling, there's something that you get out of it. There's this attachment, there's this willingness to want to always open it and get tasks done. It's called motivational UX. It's a design that helps users take action, helps them stay engaged, and helps them feel good about their progress within a product. And like I said, the rest on four pillars: affordances, feedback, flow, and gamification. Affordances, making actions obvious and doable. Feedback, we want to show users the results of every action they perform within the system. Flow, we want to keep users challenged within a single flow and not frustrated. And I'll get to the explanation of that real quick. Gamification, we want to use motivation psychology ethically to be able to build engagements on the product. And I'll start with this. Why does motivation matters? Why motivation matters is when you build a product. For instance, if you build a task, a task planner, a savings product, a budgeting product, those products are built to be used, and the different creators of these products definitely have metrics that they are tracking to be able to measure the usability of the product, to be able to measure the success of the product. And the reason why building for motivation matters is what guarantees acquisition is how well your product is being marketed. That's on initiation, right? But what guarantees retention and also encourages improvement, like improvement in the increase in adoption, also influences how acquisition happens from users to new users. What does that is when users are motivated to stay on the platform. If I'm using a platform that I really love, I'll have the motivation to come back to that platform. If I'm using a platform that I really like, I'll have the motivation to want to refer others to use that platform, hereby increasing retention, acquisition, and general adoption of the product. So when you currently look at the digital products that we currently have, you want to ask yourself, what applications or what product keeps you coming back every day, and why do you think they keep you coming back? Most of the common answers we have is we have answers like Duolingo, Instagram, TikTok, Fitbit, and various habit trackers. Now, these applications do not just help users do things, they help users want to keep doing them, right? So there's a difference between helping them do things and helping them want to continue to do things, right? They help what motivation UX increases, what motivation UX supports in an application is it supports the progress of individuals, progress of users using that product. It builds their confidence, it increases their curiosity as they go through the flow. It gives them control, and it gives them satisfaction when using the product. I'll start with the first pillar, affordances. Now, how do we explain affordances? Anything that answers the question, what can I do here and how do I do it, is creating an affordance for users within the platform. So if a user hesitates or clicks on the wrong things on your platform, then it means the affordances are unclear. And I'll give a real life example. Let's talk about the normal doors, right? When we talk about doors that the affordances for these doors are not clear. You don't know when have you ever come across a door that you don't know if you need to pull or you need to push that door to get the door open or to get the door closed? Those are normal doors. Their affordances are not very clear. When you see certain, when you buy certain products, you sometimes wonder, how do I turn this product on? How do I change the intensity of how this product works? If it's not very clear, it means the affordances are poor. It means the affordances are unclear. Now, examples are buttons that do not look tappable on interfaces. So you see different designs, dribble type designs, trendy type designs that we have lately, where you see some buttons, they don't look like buttons, they are not clickable. These are just designs. They do not mirror what actual interfaces are meant to do, what actual interfaces are meant to look like, how people interact with existing interfaces and known interfaces. We have icons that visually communicate, interaction. These are things that creates an affordance that shows the affordance of a particular system, what that system can do, what that system can do. So if you have a button that doesn't look tappable, the users don't know whether to tap or to ignore. But if you have a button that looks tappable, it is automatically it's straightforward that you need the users to be able to take an action on that screen. If you have an icon that visually communicates interaction, like your eye toggle on the password field, it you know illustrates interaction in that context. When you think about drag handles to imply movement. So for instance, when you see two cards on a page and then you do not see anything like next icons next to them or next buttons or draggers that show you that you can scroll along, sometimes you tend not to know that this is a carousel. And this being in the case where we have a screen size and you have two cards on that screen, and those two cards automatically fills the screen size, users tend not to know that we've got more cards lying on the off part of the screens. But if you've got like draggers or the dots to be able to indicate progress, or the arrows to be able to show that you can move left and move right within this system, those are types of affordances, and those are things that can show users that these are the actions that you can perform here, and these are ways you can perform these actions, right? We'll take a quick test. Imagine a user interacting with a product, and that user doesn't know what they can do, what's possible, and what happens next in the operation. So if I was on a platform and I maybe on Instagram, for example, and I'm trying to create a post, but I can't find where to create a post. The interface does not even look like it's straightforward for me to create a post, and I don't even know what happens after I create a post. It's going to be very, very difficult to use. Why? Because the basis of the platform is on creating posts and letting people engage with that post. But I do not know how to create a post. I don't know what happens after a post is created. That automatically renders the product useless, renders the product, reduces the usability of that product. And that's why I say, when you design products and you get affordances right, users feel like they get this product and these are the actions they can perform when using this product. That feeling can drive motivation to want to use. So imagine an Instagram where creating posts is, the affordance to create posts is very clear. You would be motivated to want to create a post if you want to use the application. And that's why when we are discussing the pillars of motivation, or when people think about motivation generally, they sort of go straight into gamification, gamify this system and increase how users use the system, how improve the motivation framework of this system. But it's not always like that, because at the end of the day, gamification sort of strengthens motivation, but it's not the only pillar of motivation. When we think in motivation, we want to think about motivation from the basic things that can that can increase motivation for users. We want to think about the foundational UX elements that can increase motivation. And the first thing is affordance. When people know what to do with your system and they know what will happen next when they are using your system, it increases the motivation to want to do that, because you know what to do and what happens after you do that. The second pillar is feedback. Now, affordances without feedback is sort of a structure of a disconnected system, right? When you have affordances to show you that these are the things you can do and these are the things that will happen when you do them, imagine in between those two we do not have feedback after actions have been taken. So when how do we see feedback now? When you perform an action within a system, you are meant to get a feedback to tell you if your action worked or if your action did not work. Now, any system where you take an action and you do not get feedback, you tend not to know if your action worked or if your action didn't work, if the action you've performed is going to lead to the next phase that we just discussed in affordances. Now, users automatically lose motivation when they are unsure when the system has responded. If I need to upload a file in this system and I select I browse files on my local machine and I upload, I click on that file. I have selected the file. When I click on upload file and I'm not seeing anything, or after selecting, or maybe we have a disabled button, right? And then once I select the file from my local machine, it still looks like I haven't just selected a file. The disabled button remains disabled, or even after the disabled button is enabled, when I click on the button, I'm not getting any reaction. There's no file uploaded successfully, or there's no error report. There's no transition to the next stage with the report on what the action I just performed. Using that product becomes very, very difficult. You tend not to know what's going to happen. Things begin to catch you by surprise, and that does not improve how users' motivation using this system. Examples of feedback that we like that you consider when building products are some animations when you add items to carts, or state changes when you perform certain actions, how the state changes to another state, an empty state changes to a populated state now that we've added an entry, or we've added an item to the array of items within within that state. Saved indicator. So when I upload something, when I save something, when I save a particular item to revisit later, how do I see? For instance, if you're working on your Microsoft Word document and you save and then you're not seeing anything, you begin to question, did I just save this document? Did this document save successfully? But imagine you hit the Control S, you save that document, and you get a prompt at the top that saving, the document is saving and the document has been saved. You can see the feedback of your action, and it then increases how you interact with that product, how you continue to perform that same action. Validations, success banners, error banners. It could be something as simple as a confetti when a task is done, when a task has been performed successfully. Now, here's a rule of thumb when you're approaching feedback. The more effort and action requires, and these are the keys to building motivation within a system. For instance, when a user is performing a simple action like I'm trying to save this document, it's quick. At that point, you do not want to perform, you do not want to design a heavy feedback for a simple action, right? Because it's just a one-step action. It's a two-step action. You don't want to design a heavy feedback for this. However, when action, when certain operations require extra actions, you're having steppers, you're having to perform three actions to achieve one goal. The more you do that, the more the more you have designs or operations within your products that require those number of actions, the more you want to design a satisfying and very noticeable feedback, right? So if what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make a purchase, right, on an e-commerce platform, or say Duolingo, I'm trying to learn sound in Chinese. If this is a long process, and I've been doing this, taking step one, step two, step three, step four. Once I get to the end of step four and I've completely performed this action, at the end of this step, I don't just want to see a short, modal, or an alert dialogue pop up saying you've successfully learned this. No, I've gone through multiple steps, and I want to feel that sense of satisfaction. I want to feel like the work I have been doing, is very noticeable, and I want users to at the same time see that the result is noticeable. And these are things that users wouldn't necessarily tell you in A/B testing. These are things that you would not necessarily get from users just from conversation. These are things that you observe from user psychology, how they interact with systems and how they interact with real life itself. People want to get rewarded or want to feel a sense of achievement when they when they perform hard actions. The more difficult the action is, the more sense of achievement a user wants to feel when you complete an action. When you're playing a game, maybe you're playing Wukong, or you're playing FIFA, or you're playing whatever type of game you're playing, if you've just passed a very difficult stage in the game, or you just completed a very difficult level, you don't just want to get to the next level seamlessly, like nothing just happened. You want to have a gigantic banner in front of you saying you have just passed level 25. You are about to enter level 26. You have blah 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 points. You've earned blah 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 upgrades. These are things that users want to see, and these are things that improve the motivation to want to go more. So if I've just performed 4 actions that led me to this very awesome achievement and success screen, it makes me want to do the next thing, makes me want to achieve the next, and see how far I can go performing this action, just by the sense of satisfaction that comes with seeing the feedback when I'm using this system, right? The third pillar of gamification is flow, right? And this is not just user flow. We're not talking about user flow when we're talking about flow in gamification, right? So when a user is deep into a task, right, and time seems to disappear, because when the user is deep into a task and time seems to disappear, it looks like you're logged into multiple parts of a particular trying to achieve a particular goal. And this is a simple breakdown of this. If my goal is to finish learning my learning sounds, or like monothones in English language, and it's sort of like it's a single flow, but with different steps within that flow. A very long process to be able to achieve that goal. It becomes an entire flow where, as you go into that task, the sense of time has disappeared, and all you can rely on is the experience to give you the sense of time, right? And sometimes when it comes to performing actions within a system, within a product, and this time around we're talking about multi-step actions, complex actions. Sometimes the way the experience of this entire process is designed, sort of dictates what time means to users in that medium, right? Now, when users are interacting with this type of experience, the experience is meant to feel clear. The experience is meant to feel structured. I don't want to have something that's meant to be broken into different steps or meant to have a particular structure jumbled up together to look like one very long action. I don't want to have something that's, meant to be properly structured where one step is meant to come before another in terms of the order of hierarchy and prioritization. I don't want to interact with the system where that's not clear within the process, right? Priority needs to be clearly communicated. Hierarchy needs to be clearly communicated. Order, you want to follow the UX law that states that things must follow the order that they follow in real life. And for instance, when you want to, when you go to the store to shop, the first thing you do is you enter into the store. After entering into the store, you browse from the list of things, or the catalog of things you can find in the physical store. You check this. If it's a clothing store, you check the male section, you check the female section, you check the different types of clothes you want to buy. And when you finally found the things you want to buy, you go straight to the counter to make to present the things that you've chosen and make your payments, right? And that's how it should be when people are interacting with online system. So the first thing is you want to enter the URL of the platform where you're trying to make your purchase, and that's like you entering into the physical store. And then you want to browse through the list of items available in that online store. And it's also the same as walking into a store and looking at what they've got in the showroom, looking at what they've got within the store. And once you've been able to select the things you want to buy, you can then go to your cart, which in this sense is like your self-checkout, or like going to the counter, to make payments of you to make payments for the goods and the items that you've just purchased. And that's it. Structure processes must follow the user's mental model of how they see things, how they interact with these systems in real life. And that's why it's important when you're designing a product. You want to know how users interact with that existing structure, that existing system in real life. If you're trying to design say a savings application, if you're trying to design a budgeting application, if you're trying to design something as simple as a transfer flow, you want to think about this. How do people move money? How do people save money physically? How do people make purchases in stores physically? And then it could be something as simple as an healthcare application where you're thinking about how people can book healthcare services from home, or you're thinking about a gym application or health application where people can track their eating, track their exercises. You want to think about how people already interact with these various structures in real life, and then you want to ensure that whatever you're designing fits that mental model. If you're doing anything, it will fit that mental model, but scale the experience to an whole new level. Can automate different parts of the experiences, can make different part of the experience feel better, can make things faster, can can rethink how people interact with the digital form of this service. However, you want to first understand the physical structure, the baseline, the foundation of these different, processes, of these different operations, so that you can build on that. You can use that to be able to tap into why people act the way they do, why people are motivated when they see certain things, why people feel the need to, why people feel the need to proceed after performing certain actions, or what's responsible for churn, what's responsible for drop off within a flow, within a system, right? Now, when we think about the flow, we think about a balance between the flow, because thinking about a flow, you are thinking about a challenge, right? Like I mentioned earlier, I mentioned an instance of a game, I mentioned an instance of multi-step flow. The flow is automatically a challenge, right? And that's why it's sort of most times dictates what the sense of time feels like for the users, right? The harder, like I explained earlier in feedback, the harder a particular step is, the more people want to feel a sense of achievement. However, when you're designing a flow, right, you don't want the flow to be, and and this example is not, for instance, when you're trying to just easily add something to cart, or when you're trying to quickly book an appointment. This is not the example that I am currently giving, right? For when we think about the balance that the flow will strike. You're talking about a game, for instance, when people are interacting with a game, when people are interacting with something that's meant to be challenging, say a Duolingo, you're trying to learn a particular language. You don't want to make the flow too boring. At the same time, you don't want to make the flow too stressful. So you have to find a balance in between boring and stressful. You want them to be able to perform their task as quick as possible. However, you don't want to make it to be so too boring. You don't want to make that task to be too stressful. You want to find a balance. You want to find a balance between exciting and optimized. You want it to be exciting, at the same time you want it to be quick. You want it to be to be easily accessible. You want it to be seamless. So finding the balance in between that is what makes a flow, is what drives motivation within the flow. So imagine you're interacting with an operation, and within that operation, as you move through that operation, it looks like as you move from one level to another level, it continues to get interesting. Things continue to get exciting, and the user doesn't just drop off, but the user continues to interact with the flow to unveil new layers of that step till they get to the final step. If I'm interacting with a multi-step process, and from the first step I'm already bored, I move to the second step, it's still boring, I'll drop off. Or when I move from the first step to the second step, it looks like I don't know what part of the process I'm in. I don't know what's going to be happening next. I can't, it's not building that momentum to get to where I want to get to, in this process. I would drop off. These are the things that lead to churn. These are the things that reduces motivation to be able to complete a task, to be able to perform actions, to be able to use a product. But if elements of motivation has been added to the different parts of the process, I can see what step I've completed, how many steps are left. I can see how information is being unveiled when I get into a new part of the process. I can see the things I've achieved. I can see the things I'm yet to achieve. These are things that makes the flow engaging and exciting and builds motivation as a user uses the product. How do you design a flow? You want to set clear goals. You want to add small steps instead of overwhelming tasks. So break those steps into consumable chunks, right? You want people to be able to see progress. You want to make progress visible. It could be through checklists, it could be through progress bars. You want few interruptions within the flow. You don't want surprises. You don't want any pop-ups interfering with their process. If there's anything that's meant to get reviewed as they go through the process, you want to do that seamlessly with the flow. You want to attach that to the flow. It shouldn't be any form of interruption, right? Great examples of this are when download a new application. Or for instance, if you're new to Figma, the old Figma onboarding experience, where you gradually proceed from one part of the experience to another part of the experience. These are the things that improve motivation within the system. Yes, sure.
Your screen is not showing.
Oh, thank you. It's sort of still showing on my end. Not sure why it's not showing anymore. How about now? Yes, thank you. The next step is the next pillar is gamification itself. And mind you, gamification is a big word, and sometimes I think it's cliche, but gamification is sort of a big word for a lot of sub aspects of it. The point here is you're trying to not only drive motivation, but you're also trying to drive some form of, loyalty to the product, right? Now, a lot of people, when they hear the word gamification, they think gamification means, making everything a game, making, you know, the entire product a game. However, that's not what gamification means. Gamification means using the psychology of motivation to help users stay engaged. That's the definition. That's the basic definition of gamification. You're trying to use the psychology of motivation to help users stay engaged. Now, which part of the psychology of motivation are you using? Right? It's not about turning the entire experience into the game. It could be that when you take a look at game products or gaming software, you sort of want to observe them and think about why you know they are addictive, why people want to keep coming back. And there are lots of aspects to this. One of them is progress. When you're playing a game, you can see your progress and you can measure your progress, right? There's a sense of progress when using a game, when playing a game, right? Beyond progress, there's also a sense of achievement when playing a game at every checkpoint. Beyond achievement, we also have a form of reward when playing games. So if you're playing certain games, if you're playing, say, SimCity, for instance, the more you build, the more you're able to increase, expand your territory. The more you earn certain coins, the more you're able to use that coins to buy more things, the more those things translate. Even some of these games, the coins that you earn from these games translates into like real life rewards. You can use them to get certain things at different stores, and these are elements of games. Beyond all this I've mentioned, we also have, competition, leaderboard, right? And this is also an aspect of gaming where you see some of these games. The more you play on these games, the more your ranking increases on the leaderboard. You get to see if you are amongst the top 100 players in the world, or if you're amongst the top 100 players in your state, you're among the top 100 players in your city, in your country. That sense of competition within a game is also another aspect of psychology in gaming that could be added into regular digital products, right? And we could list more and more uh elements of gamification, right? It could even be this a story mode. Stories is also an important aspect of gamification. The visual direction of the game itself is also an aspect of gamification. So you want to take a look at your product. If my product is a financial technology product, and this product does um this operation, or maybe it's a budgeting product, right? What aspects of a game, what elements of games can I add to this product to improve? And that's why it's important for you to identify what part of the product you want to increase its engagement, and then what element of gamification is best fit to increase engagement for that feature, right? It's not just something where you decide to add all these elements into you need research to be able to understand that if what I'm trying to improve is how well people budget, what element of gamification can translate to this. Is it streaks? Is it leaderboard? Is it a sense of achievement? Is it rewards and loyalty bonuses? The more people save, or the more they use the budgeting part of the application. Now, examples of gamification done well, which I've also mentioned a couple of times here, is Duolingo streaks, right? When you look at Duolingo, when you interact with the products, if you have said that you want to go on a 30-day streak on Duolingo, when you miss one day in those 30 days, you have like the Duo avatar. When you want to, when you see the dual avatar interacting with you, telling you, oh, I haven't seen you in 5 days, I haven't seen you in 10 days, why are you treating me this way? You're being unkind to me. That's a way to make people want to come back into the product by encouraging streaks. And not just that, if you are constantly keeping up with your streaks, if you're constantly using the product and keeping up with your streaks, you get to see that, oh, you're on a roll. You've been on your streak 10 days now. You're achieving ABC. It's day 800 non-stop streak on this platform. You can share that with your friends that I've been learning German, I've been learning Italian on Duolingo for 800 days straight. That's some form of sharing proficiency, sharing capability, sharing consistency within the platform. you know it's the same with Snapchat streaks. When you are friends with someone and you continue to send them media from your day-to-day life, you keep a streak with that person. And because you have a streak with that person, there's that motivation that doesn't want to, that you don't want to stop keeping that streak, because once you stop, you lose a whole lot of streak. Imagine you keeping a streak with another user for, say, 500 days, right? You don't want to stop that streak. You don't want to kill that streak. Instead, you want to continue sending. Sometimes you're only sending those media because you want to keep the fire on, you want to keep the streaks on. And that's a way to build that motivation within a product. We have Nike Run Club badges, the badges you earn as you keep running, as you keep covering more miles, as you keep doing more mileage, you keep running. You earn badges, and those badges, they stack up. You can share these badges with friends. And it's not just the Nike Run Club badges. There's this application, I think it's called Zombie Run, where I think Zombie FX or something, where it encourages you to run, to cover uh long mileage every day. And how does it work? You launch the application, you declare the number of the miles you want to run today, and then it sort of opens up a story mode for you. And it's like you're moving through a series, like you're moving through a movie, where you can start from the season 1, episode 1. You can choose a story that you like, and then once you pop up that story, you put on your headset and you start running. And when you play that story, what happens is it takes you into an immersive running journey, where it could tell you that, oh, you are in a zombie apocalypse scenario, where you are one of the few survivors, and you guys are trying to scale through a particular controlled facility to get out into into like to escape that controlled facility from the zombies. And then you keep hearing the zombies trying to attack you. You're not seeing anything, but you can feel it. You can hear the sound of the zombies pursuing you from the headset. It's an immersive experience, and the more you hear that sound, the more your acceleration, the more your speed increases, the more you accelerate, right? At certain intervals where you have declared that you want to increase your speed on the application, the noise of the zombie intensifies. If you slow down your run, the application connected to your wearables can tell that you slowed down in your run, and you can basically hear the voices or the sounds of the zombies closing in on you. So that's a way of using story mode, a way of using visualization, a way of using sounds, these elements of game, to improve the motivation, to improve how users interact with this product, to in fact change the experience of running itself in that example, right? We have habit tracker reminders. Habit trackers use reminders, which is also an important part of gamification. Reminders, oh, you are yet to close this out, you're yet to perform this action. Using reminders to be able to help you track your habits. Levels in meditation app. So you use a meditation app, you start from level 1. At a particular point, when you get to a particular level, maybe they are now you're now being called a meditation maestro. At that level, you're beginning to get into deep forms, deep arts of meditation, right? We have leaderboards and coding challenges. So you want to learn how to code, you hop on a platform that teaches you how to code. But beyond that, you're able to see a leaderboard. Oh, you wrote so line of code this week, you're one of the top 10 people to be able to debug this issue. And we have similar platforms like how people we have different products that sort of show you how people apply elements of gamification in products that you would never see, you wouldn't even see it coming. For instance, we have this mentorship platform, on ADP list. The more you mentor, the more you earn badges, the more you earn, the more you unlock some milestones. And these are ways to be able to use elements of gamification, to be able to drive motivation within a product, right? Gamification works when rewards feel earned, right? And that's why when you're designing, you want to be very thoughtful about how you are implementing gamification. Rewards have to feel earned, progress has to be visible, reward has to support the goal that you want the users to achieve. Everything must be connected, nothing must be disconnected. If your goal is you want to improve, people's budgeting behavior, you want to improve how people save, all the progress, all the rewards, and the loyalty you're trying to drive, every single form of this must be linked to the goal that you're trying to achieve, which in turn increases or impacts your KPIs, the metrics that you're using to measure the success of the product, right? Now, these are scenarios where gamification fails. Gamification fails when it pressures users, right? You want to design gamification, but you don't want it to feel forced. You don't want your users to feel forced. You run the risk of having your users, get off the app. It starts feeling like a forced experience, right? You don't want your game design, you don't want your gamification, right, to punish users for missing a particular action, for missing a day in a streak. You don't want to punish users. That's not the idea of gamification. You're not trying to punish users. If they miss a day, fine, they remain in the position that they currently are. But when they come back to it, they proceed, if they promote, they move from levels to levels, right? Because you're using a product, and regardless, you never want to feel a sense of going back. You want to feel a sense of progress, right? Now, you don't want to also manipulate people with the game. No forms of dark patterns. You don't want to manipulate people into thinking certain things when this is how your product actually works, right? Now, let's do a mini practice. Pick up an app that you frequently use, come up with this table where we have like the UX pillars, like I've listed today: affordances, feedback, flow, gamification. Pick up an application that you frequently use. It could be Duolingo, it could be TikTok. Once you've identified the application and you now know the UX pillars, you want to think about what the app does well in this different pillar. So what does the app do well in terms of affordances? What does the app do well in terms of feedback? What does the app do well in terms of flow? What does the app currently do well in terms of gamification, right? And then you also want to identify where that application can improve. Can what can it improve? What can it improve in terms of the affordances? What can be improved in terms of feedback? What can be improved in terms of the flow? How the flow is being designed, the different flow within the application, or what can be improved in terms of the gamification, right? Once you've done this, once you filled this table, I'm sure by the end of that, you already have a bogus, table. Then you want to ask, what single improvement would increase motivation without adding complexity? And that's where, the thoughtfulness when it comes to gamification comes in. When you think about gamification, you don't approach things from the big down to the minute. You want to think things from, the foundation up. If I want to gamify a system, if I want to increase the motivation of the system, I want to think that how do I, what improvements can I add into this product to improve, to increase motivation without making it extremely complex, right? So an example would be, if your application was a planner, if the application you selected here was a planning application, a planner app, how about I add streaks, you know, tracking streaks to this planner app that tracks, when tasks are completed. So if I set tasks for this week and I complete the task for today, that's day one, streak one. I complete the task for tomorrow, I'm on double streaks. Complete the task for the next day, that's my third streak. If I miss the fourth day, I ruin my streak. We go again. That's very simple. You're not adding any new feature. It's not a new feature. You're not, redesigning your entire experience. What you've just done is maybe an extra screen that shows them that, when if you've completed all your tasks today, you're on a roll, you're on, you've been on a roll, it's your third streak, it's your fourth streak, and that way what you've done is by adding the concept of streak, just, properly embedding it. And when I mean properly embedding it, means you've designed it in a way that it still doesn't feel like an add-on, it still doesn't feel disconnected, embedding that streak into every part of the product, because users can tell when a feature is an add-on, when it feels like you've just placed this on the product. You want to embed it into every single part of the product. If it's a streak, I want to be able to see what's left to achieve today's streak. I want to be able to see how many streaks I have. I want to be able to see progress bar. I want to be able to see how many streaks I've, how many times I've, not been able to meet up with my streak. And what that does is it boosts satisfaction and adds a sense of progress and achievement, to the planner app. So that's a mini exercise that, we can all do when we get home. And as we continue to do this, our idea of how to increase motivation begins to change, and we begin to consider this different. We begin to think about these different pillars differently, about these pillars differently when we're interacting with products. When you're designing a button, you now, think about affordances differently. When you're designing steps, you now think about, affordances and feedback differently. When you're designing a flow, you think about the engagement differently. Gamification, you think about the different elements of gamification and how they can affect or impact, the specific area of your product or the entirety of your product. Now, what are our key takeaways? Motivation increases when users feel capable, when they feel they can do this, when they feel confident, when they feel like they did this right, when they feel progress, when they feel like I am getting somewhere, when they feel rewarded, that is, it feels good to continue. Now, look at it again. It's a connected, feeling. I can do this. So from I can do this to, oh, I did it right, to I'm getting somewhere, to wow, it feels good to continue. That way, it's a cycle. It feels good to continue, leads you to continue, and then you're back to, oh, I can do this. I did it right. I'm getting to the next, phase. It feels good to continue, and you continue in that loop. And what happens is you've just built a cycle of your users having to come back to your product, come back to your system, come back to your tool to continue to use it. And that builds motivation. Now, what are your checklists for motivation UX when you're trying to build in motivation framework into your UX? Is the next step clear? Affordances, right? Does the system respond instantly to actions, feedback? Does the flow reduce frustration? Plus, the does it reduce frustration? Does it reduce the having users get overwhelmed when using the product? Can we reduce that? Are rewards meaningful? Are they connected to the system? Are rewards not manipulative? And there are, more checklists to this as you break down. If you take affordance and you break affordance down into the simplest of forms for the different scenario that you're using it, you could come up with more checklists to this that is specific to your context, your product. I'll conclude with this. Features don't motivate people. You can design, the best features. You can design an out of the box feature. What happens is people interact with it and they're like, oh yeah, this is great. And it still doesn't guarantee motivation. It still doesn't guarantee that they're going to be back to continue to use this system. How features feel is what motivates people. So when I interact with the feature, how I feel when I'm interacting with the feature is what motivates me. And how I feel is connected. It's like solely rests upon the pillars of how I motivate users within that feature or within the product. When we combine clarity with feedback, with momentum, with reward, users don't just use a product. They want to keep using it. They want to come back to it. They want to refer their friends to it. And this is how you build motivation in your product. This is how you build motivation in your tool. So take your time after this with all the things you've learned. Perform this exercise on existing applications, and then when you're designing your own product, create a table like this to be able to figure out how you want to approach these four pillars for your product. And in turn, you're going to be building a product that would hit all the metrics that you set for it. Thank you.